The 90s were a wild frontier for fantasy, leaving behind ambitious films that audiences just weren't ready for. Dismissed on their opening weekends, these 10 cinematic misfits found their second life on VHS and cable, rising from the ashes of failure to become immortal cult classics. Few films have ever dared to visualize the afterlife with the painterly ambition of what dreams may come. Its journey from an Oscar-winning box office catastrophe to a cherished classic is as emotional and complex as the story it tells. The entire philosophy behind this film can be found in a single quote from its director, Vincent Ward. "I wanted to make something where every frame had to be thought about like a painting." And he did. But paintings don't usually cost $85 million. This massive artistic swing, based on a novel by the legendary Richard Matheson, was a box office miss, pulling in just $71.4 million worldwide. Its abstract visuals felt more at home in a museum than a multiplex. But the film had a secret weapon that grounded its spectacular visuals: Robin Williams. In one of his most powerful dramatic performances, he gave this painterly world its beating heart, selling the desperate love story at its core. That combination of fearless artistry and raw emotion is why the film endured. It's a rare beast, a blockbuster-sized art film that never compromised. Ultimately, its legacy proves that some cinematic experiences are too profound for an opening weekend rush. They are meant to be found through the passion of heartfelt recommendation, which is why What Dreams May Come remains one of the best films most people have never seen. A visually stunning, emotional masterpiece waiting to be discovered. Crashing into cinemas with the force of a punk rock pipe bomb, Tank Girl was a glorious middle finger to 90s convention. Its utter rejection by the mainstream was the very thing that secured its destiny as a counterculture classic.
What are you waiting for?
I'm gonna need a microscope and tweezers. It's like a...
The film's production was a beautiful mess, stemming from the studio's relationship with director Rachel Talalay. They wanted to adapt the chaotic comic by a young Jamie Hewlett, but didn't seem to grasp what that would unleash. The result was a film far too strange for 1995. It was a financial catastrophe, earning just $6 million on a $25 million budget. Talalay herself perfectly summarized the paradox of her entire production in one incredible quote. She said, "The studio said, just make it like the comic book. They had no idea what that meant, which was both our salvation and our damnation." The damnation was the box office, clearly. But the salvation was the unapologetically weird energy that became a touchstone for the riot girl aesthetic and a spiritual predecessor to films like Birds of Prey. It was a glorious misunderstanding. Sometimes a movie isn't a hit, it's a stick of dynamite. And the explosion is way more interesting to watch. For a generation of 90s kids, the magic of cinema wasn't just on the screen, but in the elaborate VHS box for the Indian in the cupboard. This quiet, gentle fantasy failed to capture a wide audience in theaters, but its journey into the homes of children cemented its place as a nostalgic classic. On paper, this film should have been a slam dunk. You had director Frank Oz and E.T. screenwriter Melissa Matheson, but the film's gentle, thoughtful magic got lost in the summer shuffle. It was a quiet box office flop, grossing just $35.7 million worldwide on a $45 million budget. But its real life began on video store shelves with what might be the coolest VHS box ever made. A replica of the cupboard from the film, it came with a real key to unlock it, plus offers for additional toy figures.
There's magic in the Indian in the cupboard.
You are so real.
With this exclusive limited time offer, which is not available anywhere else, you can take hold of the magic with these Indian in the cupboard hand-painted collectibles.
This wasn't just a tape. It was an experience. You participated in the magic before you even pressed play. That physical connection is why it's so fondly remembered today. The film itself has aged incredibly well, thanks to its respectful portrayal of the Iroquois warrior, Little Bear. Its true power was unlocked not by a massive opening weekend, but by a tiny key in the hands of a kid at home. More than just a movie, it was a treasured possession, proving that sometimes the deepest cinematic bonds are formed not in a dark theater, but in the quiet magic of a child's bedroom. There are flops, and then there are legends of failure. The 13th Warrior, a gritty Viking epic from the director of Die Hard, was a financial cataclysm that has since been vindicated by a passionate fan base who saw the masterpiece hiding beneath the disaster. And cataclysm is the right word. A notoriously troubled production sent the budget soaring as high as $160 million. The film was dumped into theaters and died, grossing a mere $61.7 million worldwide. It was an absolute bloodbath for the studio, a Hollywood cautionary tale. But the reason it failed is precisely why it's now a classic. In the late 90s, audiences wanted slick, polished action. The 13th Warrior gave them mud, blood, and a terrifying sense of realism, a brutal hybrid of historical action and mythic horror that felt completely out of step. Fast forward to a world raised on the gritty realism of shows like Game of Thrones. Suddenly, the 13th Warrior doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like a prophecy. Its passionate fan base saw what the original audience missed, a smart, misunderstood epic that was simply waiting for the world to get darker. Even a flop of legendary proportions can find a glorious afterlife if it's well made and simply waiting for the right cultural moment to be appreciated. Before he took audiences to Middle-earth, Peter Jackson unleashed the Frighteners, a manic symphony of ghosts and gags upon an unsuspecting public.
The Frighteners was a movie that I made down here in New Zealand back in 1995, in the days before Lord of the Rings and King Kong. It's 10 years ago now, so I guess this is the 10th anniversary release. Looking back on my filmmaking career, The Frighteners is a very important movie for me.
Its box office failure is now just a footnote in the story of a master filmmaker honing his craft. At the time, though, that footnote felt like a failure. The film's chaotic mix of horror, comedy, and fantasy was a marketing nightmare. Audiences didn't get it, and the box office reflected that, grossing just $29.3 million on a $26 million budget, a clear money loser once you factor in marketing. But that chaos was the point. This was Peter Jackson on a studio budget, using the film as his personal playground. He called it a kitchen sink movie, trying to see how outrageous we could make it. That energy, anchored by a frantic Michael J. Fox in one of his last major roles, now looks like a dress rehearsal. You can see the blueprint for the ghost armies of the Lord of the Rings right there on screen. The studio thought they were funding a quirky horror comedy. They had no idea they were paying for the R&D that would one day conquer Middle-earth. Cursed at the box office with a muddled marketing campaign, Practical Magic worked a slow-burning spell over 2 decades, gradually becoming the essential, cozy autumn classic it was always meant to be. The studio's problem was the film's muddled tone, part rom-com, part thriller, part family drama. That chaos made it impossible to market, leading to a box office curse. It made only $68.3 million worldwide, failing to recoup its $75 million budget. But that messy quality is exactly why it found a second life. It wasn't a movie for a single weekend. It was a movie to be discovered. Audiences found its cozy vibe and the incredible chemistry of its cast. Sisters Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, and iconic aunts Stockard Channing and Diane Wiest. As Bullock herself said, "It's a film that has stood the test of time. It's a testament to the fact that the magic was in the women." That magic is exactly what turned this flop into a beloved tradition. Turns out you can't curse a film with this much charm. The magic was always there, it just needed time to work. A surrealist steampunk fairy tale built from equal parts beauty and nightmare, The City of Lost Children was a box office disappointment that proved far too unconventional for mainstream tastes. That rejection of convention is now the very source of its genius. This film is a bizarre and beautiful nightmare. It's not interested in telling a straightforward story. It speaks in allegory and symbols, drifting through dream logic instead of plot. For anyone expecting a simple narrative, it can be a frustrating watch, and that's exactly why it flopped. With an $18 million budget, this challenging vision became a commercial disappointment, pulling in just $1.7 million in the US and barely $1 million admissions in its native France. But director Jean-Pierre Jeunet was clear about his goal. He once said, "We don't want to make a movie, we want to build a universe." That unwavering commitment to vision is perfectly embodied by its star, Ron Perlman, who didn't speak a word of French but learned every line phonetically just to exist inside their creation. That devotion is why the world they built still stands, a haunting, intricate monument to imagination. A high point of surrealist cinema built not to be consumed but explored. In the end, they didn't make a hit. They made a masterpiece. And a masterpiece will always outlive a hit. In 1993, Last Action Hero was a punchline, a symbol of Hollywood hubris, and one of the most infamous bombs of the decade. Today, it stands as a vindicated and brilliant satire that was simply too clever for its own time. The film's failure began with the two titans behind the camera. You had director John McTiernan, the master of pure action, clashing with screenwriter Shane Black, the king of meta humor. It wasn't a collaboration, it was a creative civil war. Audiences expecting a straight Schwarzenegger blockbuster got a satire instead, a bait-and-switch they weren't willing to forgive. Its $137.3 million gross was a disaster against an $85 million budget, plus massive marketing. But a film that's ahead of its time just has to wait for the world to catch up. Today, its genius is obvious, a loving takedown of the entire action genre. Arnold Schwarzenegger himself understood the gamble, reflecting that the idea was a great idea, but you can't go over the head of the audience. It was a fantasy that couldn't be done. Turns out he was wrong about that last part. The audience just needed a couple of decades to finally get the joke.
This hero stuff has its limits.
Audiences and critics can change their minds dramatically over time, allowing a film once mocked as a failure to be celebrated as a visionary classic. One man, one chainsaw, and one boomstick. Army of Darkness was a modest box office performer that unleashed a cinematic hero so iconic and quotable, he single-handedly carved out a legendary space for the film in cult history.
You know your shoelace is untied.
The studio in '92 had no idea what to do with this film. A horror sequel, a medieval fantasy, and a comedy, Sam Raimi's chaotic vision was a marketing nightmare. The result was a box office money loser, making just $21.5 million on an $11 million budget plus marketing. It faded from theaters fast. But what the studio missed, home video audiences found in spades. Bruce Campbell's Ash Williams. He wasn't a noble hero. He was a smart aleck S-Mart employee with an ego he could barely carry. Campbell himself described the character's unique appeal perfectly, saying, "Ash is a loudmouth, a blowhard, a coward, and a reluctant hero. He's a regular guy in an irregular situation." That's the magic right there. That's the reason this oddity became a legend. Financial performance is irrelevant when a film is powered by a character so iconic that he can carry it to immortality all by himself. This film earns the #1 spot because its story is more than just what's on screen. It is the undisputed queen of the cinematic comeback. Its journey from a box office flop to a beloved holiday staple is a lesson in how true magic endures, making its legacy more potent than any opening weekend smash hit. Dismissed as a bizarre summer flop in 1993, Hocus Pocus performed the ultimate magic trick, transforming itself over the years into an essential Halloween tradition for millions. Looking back, the failure seems impossible. With a cast that was lightning in a bottle, Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy, a bizarre July release led to a dismal box office. The magic, it seemed, had fizzled out. But that on-paper failure didn't account for the cast's infectious chemistry, which audiences rediscovered on home video year after year. It was a sense of fun so palpable that star Bette Midler herself said, "Of all the films I've ever made, that is my favorite. We were like a girl group." That energy now fuels a cultural phenomenon every October, proving that some spells just take time to fully kick in. Hocus Pocus is the ultimate proof that a film's true destiny isn't decided on opening weekend. It finds its moment and achieves immortality. So there you have it. 10 films that prove the studio accountants don't always get the final say. If you enjoyed this trip through the weird and wonderful back alleys of 90s cinema, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the films that time almost forgot. Thanks for watching.